Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 55 of the Whitey and Will Sports Show. Today is Sunday, December 4th, 2022, and we've got a guest this week. Basketball season's in full swing, and basketball is a sport that this man is synonymous with in the area. A legendary player at Teutopolis High School, and then at Millikin University and overseas, Leon Gobczynski. Nice enough to join us on the show today. Leon, thanks so much for coming on the show with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Leon, you are, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I took the crash course, a 1971 T-Town graduate, and then you went to Millikin and are still the career scoring leader at Millikin University, unless something has changed very recently. The most up-to-date information I found shows you as still the career scoring leader. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
And I might add that I'm also the career scoring leader in the College Conference of Illinois and Wisconsin as well.
Right. Yeah, the CCIW. 2,635 points in your Millikin career. That's 28 points per game. You played 94 games at Millikin and racked them up. In fact, in Millikin history, the next closest person is more than 400 points behind you. And really, nobody in recent history has come close. I'm looking at the list here. The number 5 person on the list played up until 1997 and scored like 900 fewer points. So it just seems like a record that may not ever fall. That seems to be records are made to be broken, they say, but this one has been standing for a long time and hasn't been really challenged in quite some time.
Well, I have something to add to that too. And now they're playing not 94 ball games in a 4-year career. They're playing 105 and 108 and 113.
Yep. So it's quite impressive. And then that wasn't the end of your basketball career. And this is where, I think Mike and I'll probably ask you to fill in the blanks a little bit. You played overseas, you played in Europe for almost a decade, I think it was, and played at a pretty high level there in France. I think I saw Switzerland. How many different clubs did you play with while you were overseas as a young man?
I played with 4 different teams. We started in Lugano, Switzerland, my first year there, which was just absolutely a gorgeous place and really higher level basketball than you might think, because it's such a small country, but there's a lot of money there, and they pay their players quite well to come over and play in that league. And after that, I went to France, 2 different teams, one team at Nancy, France, and then I spent another additional 6 years in Saint-Brieuc, France, which is in the coast of Brittany, which was another gorgeous place to live. And then we spent our last half year in a place called Courtrai, Belgium, where I played for a half a year, being a new team and with youngsters. We just had our twins a year earlier. We decided it was just time to get back to the States and start our lives here.
Mm-hmm. So you lived full time overseas then? It wasn't just like an in-season thing. It was were you there pretty much all the time while you were in your professional career?
Well, it was a 9-month period. We played, including the before preseason games and then the after season tournaments. That was pretty much how the contracts were all written for the foreign players over there. And then the 3 months we came back to the United States. And I usually got some work over here with framing houses with Jim Walduff Construction. Did that for like 13 summers. It was a good way for us to just kind of stay in shape and stay active and get back to our life here as well and see the people that we loved here in the States.
Now, how did it come to be? And we'll get back to your high school and college stuff too, because I think that the people who watch our show probably want to reminisce a little bit about that kind of stuff. But I'm curious, did you aspire to play overseas? Like when you were at Millikin, was that were you thinking I'm going to go be a pro somewhere, or was it kind of tell me how that all transpired for you?
Well, it's a pretty good story. I always wanted to be a professional basketball player. and not everybody does. And it just happened that I was finishing up my student teaching at St. Teresa High School in Decatur, and that was at the end of March. And I was on my way home thinking, now what in the world am I going to do? It's graduation's not until May. People don't start hiring new teachers for another 2-3 months. Am I going to find a job? I'm engaged to be married. What's going to happen to my life? I come home, I get out of the car, I come in the back door of the house of my parents, and on the refrigerator, my mom says, "Hey, there's a letter from Italy up there for you." I'm thinking, well, that's a little strange. So I open it up, and it's a letter from an agent in Italy by the name of Jim McGregor. He had an all-star team, and he was proposing that I come over for a 7-week tour. He would pay for everything for me to get over there, and that would then get me some teams interested by watching me play, because once you're over there and they see what you can do, obviously stats are great in a magazine, but if they can actually see you play, then it's a whole different deal. So I went over there for 7 weeks with Jim McGregor, had some great times, saw some things I never could have possibly seen. We actually played against the Yugoslav national team a few times, who won the gold medal in 1980.
Yeah.
We think that we had a little bit to do with that, and those were some great games. But if you want to talk about being on a hostile court, try going in front of 15,000 Yugoslavs who are not for your team to win. And I don't think the referees were for us to win either, quite honestly.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You talk about coming back home to work. Do you keep up with the professional game overseas now? Like, I know that people can go over there and make a good living at it. Was that something that you did just out of necessity, or something you did just to stay busy? Or is it is the pay for your the pay in the European professional leagues a little different now than it was 40 years ago?
Oh, I'm sure there's a big difference now. But the thing about it is I always tried to tell this to people. I say it's not about necessarily how much you're paid, it's how much you can save, because at the time there were no taxes on the money. There also was, you got a car as part of your agreement, and you got your utilities and your apartment paid for by the team as well. So you really only had your food and gas for the car that were your expenses. Anything else was your entertainment, and you could spend as much or as little as you wanted.
Yep. And your wife was with you from the start. Did she go over with you and you guys, that was because you said you were engaged, right? When you got that letter. So she went on the ride with you. It seems like it would be a very unique way to get your life together started.
Well, we got married on Saturday, and Monday we were in Amsterdam. So trying out with basketball teams. So I guess we had a honeymoon, but it was kind of a business affair and a honeymoon at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were able to wine her and dine her in Europe, Leon. That's that's a honeymoon there.
It was pretty nice. And we did end up in Switzerland, which is like paradise, I have to tell you. It's a tremendous place. And if anyone's ever been to Lugano, they know what a beautiful city that is.
Was there, as far as the culture gap for you, going from living in Central Illinois your entire life to being in another country and not speaking a language and all that, was it a difficult adjustment, or were there enough other, like, I mean, obviously I think it sounds like the agent that got a hold of you was an American that had set up shop over there. Were there quite a few other American players to where you could at least find some people that you could talk to until you got your bearings?
Well, in Switzerland, most people do speak 3 or 4 languages, so we didn't really have an issue in Switzerland. But the next year, when we decided that we were going to take a different team with Nancy, France, I decided to put in my contract that they had to pay for schooling for my wife and myself to learn French, because I did not want to be in a situation where I did not understand what people were saying, either in the crowd or in the store or on the team. And so that served us very well. And of course, 6 years later, we were with another team in France, and we were speaking French the whole time. So that really was a good move on our part, I think.
But you said that eventually, just with your kids being born, it was time for you to get back to the old stomping grounds.
Well, I had a choice of either staying over there, becoming a player coach, or I needed to get back to the States and get my professional life in order here. And that's what we decided to do, simply because of the age of the kids and the age that we were at. I was just over 30 years old. That's not old for a basketball player, but you could see the writing on the wall. There really was a crossroads there that I had to decide what I wanted to do.
Leon, you always hear about the atmosphere in European games can be a little testy compared to here. Did you get your eyes open pretty early to that?
I loved it. I love a brutal atmosphere, and it was the same thing when we were playing in high school with some of the big rivalries. Those crowds can get kind of crazy, but I just fed off of it. I didn't care if they were yelling against me. That just made me know they were interested in the game, and I love passion, and no matter what shape it takes.
Did you ever have you were probably looked at as kind of the bad guy when you guys would go on the road, a big guy like you, and not afraid to bang with people. You probably had a reputation.
Well, yeah, I did. And eventually I became captain of our basketball team in France, which is an unheard of thing. An American being a captain of a French team just does not happen. And that was something that I valued greatly, that the team put enough confidence in me to do that.
Did you run into environments like that much in your college career, or was it pretty laid back at those games for the most part?
We had some tussles with Augustine and Wesleyan, where we're playing in full gyms with 5,000 people. There were some and it was high quality basketball too. I think a lot of people don't understand what it was like back in the 70s when all these teams were NAIA schools versus NCAA threes today. Now they don't offer scholarships. Back when I was there, they did. And so you had high quality players up and down the league. And they were very tall as well.
Yep.
I could bore you with some names, but gosh, I'm sure the Jack Sikma, the John Lang, the Bruce Hammings. Those folks were all taller than me in the league at the same time, and so I wasn't exactly the guy that was towering over everybody. There was some real talent in the league.
We got Mike.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sikma being at Wesleyan at the same time. That's you guys probably had a decent little rivalry against each other, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Millikin and Wesleyan don't like each other much, kind of like the St. Anthony Teutopolis rivalry. They're similar sized schools, similar values. They both have great educations. It's just the way it is.
You mentioned that St. Anthony T-Town rivalry, something that you participated in, a long time ago, but as you mentioned, that's been going on for decades now. Let's talk a little bit about that. Any particular memories from some of those games that still stick with you all these years later?
Well, I've got a few actually. My best memory, if we're going to talk about best, and hey, why not, was when we played St. Anthony for the regional championship in 1971 in Teutopolis. We were seeded number 1. St. Anthony was seeded number 2. They had won once during the season. We had won once during the season. The coaches poll favored St. Anthony, and we went into that game pretty much equals. But I just did some research for my memoirs that I'm doing right now, and we slammed them 92-78. But that was a game I scored 41 points, shooting 17 of 23 from the field, and then 7 of 13 from the free throw line. And I sat out the third quarter. So it was a tremendous experience. The town was crazy. St. Anthony had won 9 in a row to that point before we beat them that second time in the season. So it was a big win, those 2 wins. And by the way, that was St. Anthony's only 2 defeats in that season was by our team.
Yep. Now, you played, let's see, you played, it would have been for Lawrence Carey, right? That was who's coaching at T-Town whenever you were there, right?
That's correct.
Any good anecdotes about him?
Oh man, we're gonna have to do 2 or 3 more podcasts if we're gonna talk about that, because there's a lot of stories. We know. I'll say this about Lawrence: when he prepared his team, we were always prepared with great fundamentals, and we always had a good scouting report on how to face the other team, and that was, in my opinion, his real strengths were that as a coach, to get us prepared to hit the floor, and then after that, we just had to execute.
Yeah. When you made the decision to go to Millikin, was there? I assume that you had some choices there. What were you picking between there? Do you care to say, or was it actually pretty much a slam dunk for you?
Well, there were some teams that had interest in me. The University of Oklahoma, let's see, Louisville, Indiana, and then there were teams that actually had offers out there for me. SMU, Tulane University, Georgia Southern, Southeastern Louisiana, Stetson University, Eastern, Southern, Illinois Carbondale, Texas Arlington. I could go on and on. I mean, there were boxes full of those things. And as a youngster, you get really, really, really confused when that time comes to make a decision, because there really isn't that long of a time. There's a couple month period where you're expected to make a decision. And I had no idea all of these schools were kept at bay until I was actually done with my high school career. So meaning I did not receive any letters through the school. They were not allowed to contact us, to be in contact with us as players until after the season was over. So it was a very short period of time to make a decision. And as any 17-year-old would tell you, you get pretty confused pretty quickly with everybody telling you how great you are. And a lot of that comes down to, I really thought at the time that the coaches were recruiting me because I was a great player. And that's not true at all. I come to realize that they were recruiting me because I had a lot of potential to become a great player. And I think there's a difference. And that's why sometimes basketball players who are not recruited, and this happened on my team as well, they were all saying, hey, I've got good stats. Why am I not being recruited? I'm a certain size. I've got similar statistics. But I think it's always the upside that a coach is looking for, that say, hey, this person. And in my case, when I was in high school, I got 14 points as a freshman in freshman basketball. I didn't play anything other than that. And then sophomore, I played quite a bit because a couple of the players were moved up to the varsity. So that kind of left me some playing time. And I really, really enjoyed my sophomore year, because I was playing sophomore ball, JV ball, and sitting on the varsity bench. So I was playing almost every night of the week. Yeah. And then my junior year came, and then I just started taking off. Growing 4 inches in one summer between my freshman and sophomore year kind of caught the attention of a lot of people and said, maybe we need to get this guy a little more playing time.
Aside from your size, what would you say is that upside that the Millikin coaches and the other coaches saw in you? What was it that they felt like you would become?
I think my shooting touch was as good as any big man I've ever seen. My shooting touch, a very quick release, very difficult to block. And I kind of developed that shot, as a process. I watched a lot of things. I listened to a lot of coaches. Whenever it comes down to shooting, I don't think a lot of people understand that that's the main goal of basketball. A lot of people want to talk about defense. A lot of people want to talk about rebounding. But, that number one thing is to be able to score the basket. And to do that, you have to research that and practice. I think that's the key word, practice it a lot.
And a guy your size in the high school game, doesn't necessarily need to have a good shooting touch to score a bunch of points. But again, you get to that next level, and you, like you mentioned, lots of guys your size or even bigger in the league. you got to have a skill set if you want to, if you want to be any good, right? Like it stops being just about physically dominating 95% of the people that you are encountered with.
Well, and one of the things, and Leon kind of hinted at, but I know you had over 600 points your senior year, and I was surprised to see when I looked that you weren't a 1,000-point scorer. And you talked about being a late bloomer. You went through that 4-inch growth spurt between your freshman and sophomore year. And I got to think coaches are saying, hey, this kid wasn't getting a lot of playing time, and now he's scoring 60-some, 600 points in a season. There is upside here. There is potential. And they were right, because, then you look what you did in college, and, you were just getting warmed up as a senior.
That's kind of how I felt about it. I definitely felt there was an upside. And I see a lot of centers today, where my skill set came was I was able to either be a banger underneath and score from in close, or I could take you out 15, 17 feet and shoot the jump shot. If you're a big, slow guy, I'd drag you away from the basket and take you outside. If I can overpower you, I'll take you down low. And I don't think there are a lot of players in the game today. Maybe Tashibwe from Kentucky is a great player, but I don't see a lot of players who have both of those skill sets to be able to shoot inside or out.
Yeah, it's and a perfect example of that, when you had Kofi at Illinois, so dominant inside 5 feet, and but he didn't have the game beyond that translates, to the NBA. So he's playing overseas right now, and I'm sure that's a work in progress where he's got to learn to do that if he has aspirations to getting back in the States and playing in the NBA.
Absolutely.
Who's and maybe this is putting you on the spot, maybe there's not one clear-cut answer, but in all your playing career, did you have a nemesis, somebody that you came up against frequently that maybe got you as many times as you got them, just good battles every time you went head to head with each other?
Oh, I would say overseas, it would have been Louis Dunbar, who was a draft pick out of Houston and was the clown prince later of the Harlem Globetrotters. And then there's Greg Stretch Howard from University of New Mexico, who was a first-round draft pick in 1970 for the Phoenix Suns. These guys were good and long, and I had a lot of success against both of them, which they didn't think could happen because they were just not ready for the quickness of my shot, getting my shot away. They thought they had time to get to me, and they didn't. But they were great players as well, and they got their share against me as well because they're so long, and their talent was pretty obvious. And I know both of them. I have very fond memories of the battles we played against them. A matter of fact, I played against Stretch Howard, Greg Howard, for the Switzerland Championship in a game at their place, and they won by 4 points. But it was just one of those games that was just fun to play in, and there's not a whole lot of those that you like losing. But that was one of those games that you played in. You're like, man, that was a great game. We both had great games in that game, and the crowd loved it.
The leagues that you played in France and Switzerland, do they still exist as they did then? Are they things that you can keep up with now, or have things been restructured since then?
They have been restructured a lot actually. Some of the teams for financial purposes come and go. I mean, a lot of them, you need sponsors over there. It's an expensive proposition to have a team. And basketball is loved. It's by far the second best sport in Europe. People love basketball in Europe. Mm-hmm. I think as Americans, we sometimes misunderstood or didn't quite understand that. And I think you see the outgrowth of us going over and playing and keeping that interest going, that we have a lot of NBA players now who come from Europe. And that just wouldn't have happened without us early ones going over and really sparking interest in the game and continuing it.
Do you stay pretty close and up to date with college and high school game now, or is it more of a passing interest. I know you did some broadcasting, and I want to ask you about that too, but I don't know where you're at now.
Well, I like to go see some games. I like the kids. I like to see the interest. I like youth games. The younger, the better. I just love their enthusiasm. To see them out there on the floor, trying their best, aspiring to be players, and watching their development. And I think I like that the best. But I'd go to some college games. I go to some Eastern games where my son played, and I've got fond memories of that. And I like going to some high school games. I don't probably go to as many as I probably should. I'll go to 4 or 5 this year. It's just the game has changed a lot from the time that they put that 3-point shooting line in. And there's a lot of teams who run that 4-1 offense that I really don't like it as much as the old traditional way, where you came down the floor and you ran some motion offense and people got their shots, and the big guys weren't 30 feet from the basket setting screens for a 5'2" person. I just don't understand that, because if you have a great inside player, you should get the ball to the inside player where he's at. And what drives me craziest, and I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but when I see a big guy grab a rebound 2 or 3 feet from the basket, and he doesn't go back up with the basket and he tosses it out for a 3-point shot, that drives me crazy, because that person has not only earned the right to shoot that ball, but 2 out of 3 things are going to happen that are good because he's got the ball in that position, which you're always trying to get close to the basket. He puts the ball up, he's going to score, or he's going to miss, or he's going to score and get fouled. A traditional 3-point shot, or 2 points, or he's going to miss the basket. And if he misses the basket, he shouldn't have scored anyway. He shouldn't probably be in if he's going to miss a lot of those. So.
I mean, I guess probably part of that is just that what your mindset was, in your playing days, and you just can't imagine passing up a golden opportunity like that.
No, can't imagine that. I never would have.
And another thing, when you're talking about today's game, Leon, I go back to about 2007. Lucas O'Rear down in Nashville is really the last, what I would say, really good big man I've seen in high school basketball, because he would play on the block. He was strong. He loved contact. He punished you. And I was talking with Bree Central's coach during the Thanksgiving shootout, or Thanksgiving tournament there. And, we talked about that. It's been a while since you've had those big, strong post guys who I guess the word isn't feared, but it is, because they can get 40 tonight and have half our team in foul trouble. I mean, the game, you're right, has become such a 3-point oriented game. And I like seeing big guys who can catch it in transition, and if there's nobody there, being able to shoot the 3. I like that aspect of it, because then they at least got to honor you and guard you. But there's not a lot of bigs who can just catch it on the block and continually be a threat. They can be a threat for a few minutes in a game, but prolonging that for a whole night, it's just they don't exist hardly anymore.
Couple things on that. I don't think big men, I don't think people are being, let me back that up. I don't think the big man's being taught how to post up down low. I don't think there's a lot of skill set with our coaches who are mainly smaller types that know how to get the big man position, get him the ball, and insist that when they're open to get him the ball in that shooting position. Now, if that happens, it makes it easier for those 3-point shooters who are out there looking for that shot to get a clear look at the basket, because somebody's going to have to come dragging down to help defend that big guy, and they toss it back out, and then they're going to get those shots. So one hand washes the other, but I only see one hand getting washed in today's game for the most part.
I agree. And I agree. When you get a post who gets doubled down or triple down, and those kickouts for guards, that's the best look because you're catching the pass from the basket, you're looking at the basket, you're catching, shooting. That's your best look. And, you're right. It's a catch-22, and you don't get as many feeds. And then you want, it's just, but it's the development. I agree with you. I've seen post players whose footwork is terrible, who have one move on the block, if they have one move. And you're right. It is development of post players. I agree 100%.
And see, Lawrence Carey taught me many, many things about the post player, about not bringing the ball down, not putting the ball on the floor, turning and shooting, as soon as you get the ball to face the basket and be in that triple threat position. I don't see a lot of that stuff going on today. You see their feet pointing the wrong way, and then they get double teamed and they're swiping at the ball because it's down by their knees. It's just a lot, and get that ball up and get those elbows out. I have no problem getting my elbows out. No problem at all.
I heard that when you played men's league at the rec center, Leon. You may have actually.
They were fouling me all the time, Mike.
I heard you may have actually sharpened your elbow. Someone I don't know if that's true, but that was a rumor.
It might have been.
Can you still grab a ball and go out and knock down a 15-footer now? Do you ever go over to the Park District Court, and take a few jumpers, or is that in the rearview mirror at this point?
That's in the rearview mirror. After I got my knees replaced, it just doesn't feel the same trying to jump off of them, and it just throws everything off. So I've kind of given that up after that. So yeah, but I love it.
You mentioned having an opportunity to maybe be a player coach on a team overseas and walking away from that. Has anybody ever approached you about, being on a bench, for a high school or a college team in the area? I mean, did that ever come to pass at any point?
He coached at Altamont for
that's why I'm asking. I'm a young man, Mike. These are the things you're supposed to know.
He was coaching when I was at St. Anthony. He was the head coach at Altamont when I was JV fresh soft coach at St. Anthony. All
right. Well, I'm an idiot. Go ahead.
We had some battle. Altamont St. Anthony had some battles back then.
I started out at Oblong in 1984-85, and we won 2 basketball games that year. And I have always said that Jesus and the 12 disciples could not have won 4. That was the kind of team we had. But I never worked so hard in my life as I did that year in coaching basketball. And then the next year we went to Beecher City, and we were 23-5, and played Teutopolis twice. At the end of the third quarter, we were tied with them both games. Going into the fourth quarter. So we had a pretty salty team that year. They won the state championship. And then I went to Altamont for 3 years, and then I got into administration. So I've had a little bit of basketball coaching experience, and I always enjoyed the kids.
Now, Whitey, here's a little known fact. Here's a fun fact for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
The very first hospitality room at the NTC tournament was put on by Becky Gobczynski, Leon's wife, when he was coaching at Altamont. We didn't know how to act when we had a hospitality room, because I was coaching with Dave at the time, and Becky made it was like chicken salad or ham salad sandwich. Because didn't she teach home ec, Leon?
No, she was a French teacher. She was a
French teacher.
Got that job for being overseas.
Yeah, she learned French free from tagging along with Leon playing in Europe. So that paid off. So we had sandwiches, and we had water, coffee, and such. And that was a hospitality back in the day. Those almost didn't exist, but Becky started the first one.
The NTC hospitality room, which now, it's it's as big as the tournament itself, right? Like you can't go over there and not at least stop in and see what they've got tonight. That's anyone who's brought me along in media, whether it's radio or newspaper, has always been like, you can't go to Altamont and not eat. We got to get there early enough to eat. That's very important. So we owe our debt of gratitude for that. And then speaking of broadcasting, Matt Robinson has told me that when he kind of broke into doing games on the radio, that he worked some with you, and that was how I knew that that's how I learned that you did it. How'd that come to be? How long did you do that? And did you feel like you were any good at it?
Wow. Okay. First things first, I sat in, they came by, double Q radio came by and wanted to know if I wanted to take an ad they were going to start airing Teutopolis basketball games. I think that was in 96 or 97. And I said, well, who's going to do the color? And they said, well, we don't have a color man. I said, well, I'll do it. And I said, well, great. Come on by and, we'll give you a little bit of money. And I really didn't care about the money. But so I show up and I'm sitting next to the announcer, and the announcer says, oh, by the way, next game you're going to do this yourself because I'm quitting as of today. I'm like, okay, I've gone from no experience to now I'm the man doing this. And that's what I did for like 7 years in a row. When my son went play basketball, I broadcast. And if it was a big game like a regional or something, the regional championship, I let somebody else broadcast that because I didn't want to be involved in that. And at the National Trail Tournament, Matt was just walking by, and my side man couldn't make it that day. So I just asked him if he'd like to, sit in and do a little color with me. And he's like, well, sure. And oh, by the way, he told me that he was a broadcast major at Lakeland. I was like, great. So that's how he broke in. We did a few games at the tournament. Not long after that, he got on with WXEF, and, the rest is history.
Yeah.
But really, you're to blame for Matt Robinson being on the radio.
I guess I am, but I'm also, he does a great job, and Greg does. And your dad, Mike, was just the best. I just loved his broadcast, and I know everybody would like to see him come out for just one more game.
We've talked about trying to make that happen before. It's been an internal conversation before. I don't know how hard we'd have to twist his arm, but
I'm not sure radio stations got that big a budget anymore. First off, this game would have to start early because by 9 o'clock he's ready for bed.
Well, there's tournament games coming up. Tournament games.
Yeah, I know, and I always end up doing color on the T-Town site. He couldn't do play-by-play. He's even told me that, because I know he came after he retired. He came back and did a few games. He kind of did color and stats. He can keep up with that, but you never say never with him. Sometimes he will amaze you, and Leon mentioned memoirs. Dad's actually working on putting stuff together on his, doing all the sports stuff, kind of putting a bound version of all the 8 million short stories. And I start laughing because as soon as I start reading one or I see the title, I know it. I've lived half of them and I've heard it. And Leon, actually, tell me the story you said about it was like the second or third broadcast you had when you ran into Dad, maybe in the restroom. Tell me that story, John.
Well, you don't, once you start broadcasting, there's no respites out there. So you need to make sure everything timing is going off great so you don't have to leave the booth. So I run into your dad, Larry, in the bathroom on my second game. And I said, Larry, we probably have 2,000 games between us. I said, so let's get out there and do a good job today. And he thought that was funny because I had 2 and he had the rest.
You mentioned broadcasting your son's games, and that's another thing, that's another connection that you and Matt Robinson had, because he's done such a good job of, even when his son, who is a very, also a very talented player in the National Trail Conference, even when his son is playing the game, you would never know that that's his kid out there. And I imagine, my kids are young, so I don't know quite yet, but that's got to be a challenge to play it cool when that's your kid out there competing.
Well, for the most part, it's not as hard as all that. But when the big games come and there's a lot on the line, it can get you want to make sure that you can not only broadcast that objectively, but also be able to enjoy watching the game to its fullest. And if you want to make a comment, knowing that you're not on the radio, or just say that was a bad call, you can say that as a fan, and you really can't say that on the radio.
Yeah. So.
And I've worked with Matt doing an Altamont. I think I've done actually 2 Altamont games with him. And I even complimented him when we were on the way home. I said, man, I want to tell you something. I wouldn't have known you were Mason's father during the broadcast, because he's so conscious of that. He tries to, it's almost like that Robinson kid, another turn, it's almost like, I don't want to say he talks his son down, because he gives him props when he earns his props. But it's not like, oh my gosh, this kid's got skills, because he really goes out of his way to be, very, he's a Switzerland announcer, man, when his son's, he goes out of his way to just, so you don't know that. And I commend him for it. But again, being a parent, you're right, Leon, it's got to be hard.
Maybe part of the deal is that with a name like Robinson, it's so common, right, that people might not even guess that one Robinson is the other Robinson's father or son. But with Gobczynski, I'm not sure that people could have not made that connection.
You can't swing a dead cat in T-Town without hitting Gobczynski. There's everybody.
There aren't many of us, Mike. Not many.
Well, Leon, we promised you no more than a half hour. We've gone over that, but Mike, is there anything I haven't touched on that you think that we need to ask Leon about?
No, and we can always revisit. I know we can get Leon. We've got other people, we've talked about having on again, or having a panel talking about stuff, and we can always do that. It's I really enjoyed it. I did not see Leon play in high school. I saw him, play a little bit in men's league down at the rec center. But I did not see him play in high school or college. But I do know from talking to my father, what kind of player he was. So, I give him a lot of props for that. And like I said, I didn't know he was the late bloomer per se, but when you look at his high school career versus his college career, really compare it all together, you're thinking, where did this kid come from? Because, all of a sudden he had a really bright senior year, and then in college, different person. And that's the thing that's the most amazing, I think, of when I look at those numbers. That's impressive. And, he's, done a lot of things, since his career's over, got out of education, and has done some good things for the community.
The one thing I think people forget, though, is when I graduated from high school, I was only 17. My birthday's in October. So I was almost a year behind. If I would have been born like 2 months later, I'd have been in the younger class. So I would have got another year to go as well.
Yeah.
School. So I think that made a difference. And,
Sure.
I can tell you there are some communities I go out and I see the kids in 8th grade, and they've got beards and they've got hair under their arms. And then I see some other kids come out and they're skinny legs and, baggy pants. And you're like, well, that kid's going to grow into that uniform. That kid's just about done developing.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is,
That kid playing center in 7th grade with the 5 o'clock shadow, his career's about done, because he's 5'11" in 7th grade, and he's going to be 5'10" as a senior in high school. So, yeah, it's amazing.
I got to tell you the story. And my son Andrew, we went over to Cowden Herrick and played, and my son says, "Dad, they have hair." In 6th grade, and I said, "It'll be all right, son. You'll still beat them." And then they did.
I'll throw this in there, and I had a class at Eastern sports in the media, taught by a guy by the name of Howard Price. And there were 2 or 3 basketball players in the class that sat back in the back of the class every time I met. And your son was one of them. He was a couple years ahead of me in school, but I did have a class at Eastern with Andrew. I would not have been anybody that he would have ever mentioned, but pretty unremarkable. But thought I'd throw that out there, that we did share one classroom in Eastern when we were there at the same time. Mike, you got anything else, or should we?
No, we're good. I know it's getting about Leon's bedtime. We probably let him get done, and he's got a busy day at work. He's probably got to be at work by noon tomorrow, so we'll let him get,
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I've really appreciated it. Anytime you want to chat about basketball or have some more stuff, just let me know. Happy to.
Sounds good. Hey, we appreciate it, Leon. Thanks for the time.
Thanks so much for the time. Yep.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
All right, that's Leon Gobczynski, Teutopolis High School graduate, a player that really, you look at, again, I would encourage you to just look up the men's basketball records at Millikin and check them out and just see how far ahead of everybody else on that scoring list.
Well, look
Leon
at the individual games.
Yeah.
What did he average? He averaged, what was his average in college?
He averaged 28 points a game even in his college career.
And high school, because, contrary to popular belief, sometimes we do a little research. And I was going, I wonder where Leon ranks on these 1,000-point scores at T-Town. And his name's not on there. And then I saw, his senior year, he used to have the record for scoring 600 and some points as a senior. And you're thinking, wow. But yeah, he said he was a late bloomer, and it was really his junior year before he started getting some playing time. And then to be, within a couple of years, he's a dominating player at the collegiate level.
62 points in a game. That's a tie for the individual record at Millikin. He put up 44 shots in that game. You got to shoot to make a lot.
He liked to shoot. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. Leon was not bashful, but he was a good shooter.
So he was 26 of 44 in that game, because the number of field goals obviously was also an individual record. So yeah, you go to Millikin and look up their individual men's basketball, or you look up their men's basketball records. You'll see his name all over that thing. And again, you look at you look at anybody who's even come close to challenging his numbers. None of it's happened recently. And he brought up a good point about how many more games they play now than when he did. And yet nobody's going to touch that. It doesn't appear. So very impressive. And we're really glad that he was able to take some time.
Yeah, he did a good job. No, it was good. And, that's one of the things, people from, when I say the past, it's great to have guests talking, about that who've played and, been good players. And, we've had a couple on, but, we've talked about, getting more and more this year. So that's awesome. Did a good job. Whitey, before we go on, I got to tell you, did Hearts at Taylorville with Greg Thursday night. Okay.
Yeah.
I saw the greatest attempt by a student cheering section of distracting the shooter I've ever seen, high school, collegiate level, ever. It took every ounce of self-control I had to not start dying laughing on the air or saying 4-letter words about how funny it was.
Okay.
So unfortunately, they were shooting, and I don't know what direction, but the Hearts were shooting free throws late in the game. And the students at Taylorville are on that end where the bleachers come, the stands come down low.
Yeah, sure.
And all night there was 2 kids in bunny suits. Okay, like footy pajama bunny suits. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's still. Well, I don't remember. It may have been oh my gosh, and I can't remember his first the Fox. What's his first name? I'm sorry.
Spencer
Fox is at the line. So we have a fan in the audience who just whispered in my ear. So Spencer's at the line shooting, And I think he missed the first one, and he's getting ready to shoot the second one. And now I see one of these kids in the bunny suit. Again, he's not directly down the lane under the basket. He's off 8 feet, 10 feet left of the lane. So it's not directly in his line of view, but in his periphery. And this kid is on a seat, and he's got his feet propped up on the railing, you know. And there's 2 kids standing next to him, and they had on like scrubs, and they're holding a towel over his waist and his lower lap. And this kid's just, he's making faces and he's yelling, and this fox is getting ready to shoot. This other kid jumps up out of the towel in the bunny suit like he was giving birth. And I almost died, Whitey. I mean, I thought I was going to lose it, but I couldn't say anything on the air. It was a very visual thing. But I got to give props to those kids from Taylorville. That's the best thing I've ever seen.
Well, they got to find.
If I was shooting free throws, I'm not sure I would have got the ball to the end line. I'd have been laughing so hard.
Unfortunately for the Taylorville boys team, they are still looking for they're 0-6. They lost again on Saturday. So they're still looking for a win. So maybe you got to find some other ways to entertain yourself when you're in the crowd.
It was good. I give the kid credit. I mean, it was pretty fun.
That's even better than I was watching the end of Eastern's women's game on ESPN Plus, and it's Rob Calhoun doing the play-by-play. He's a WEIU guy, and then Lane Blickham, who does a lot of broadcasting for Cromwell. He does the color for those broadcasts, and apparently while one of the Northern Illinois women was shooting a free throw, somebody in the stands at the Eastern game just screamed mashed potatoes at the top of their lungs, like just the most random thing, you know, just to try to
like the people at golf tournaments I'd like to hit with a hammer.
Yeah, it would never be me screaming stuff at somebody when they shoot free throws. I feel like that's just that's probably crossing the line of good sportsmanship, even as a fan. But you know,
dead silence is the greatest.
I guess college players should probably be expected to
and I've seen the college kids shooting free throws and them holding Sports Illustrated swimsuit posters and stuff, and you see all kinds of crazy stuff. But this was imaginative and funny, and like you said, I was impressed with my self-control not to go nuts on the air.
And that was a good win for Effingham. You know, I mean, Effingham, we can segue from there.
Let's talk about them first.
Yeah, they they came off of what I would call a challenging week at the Thanksgiving tournament. Although we mentioned last week when we talked that really of the 3 teams in our area that were in that tournament, Effingham, St. Anthony, and T-Town, the Effingham probably from day one of the tournament to Saturday probably showed the most improvement, and they that's winning a 60-57 game on the road shows you that you kept your composure, right? Like, I mean, there's points where games get away from you.
And it was a physical game. And I don't want to say it was chippy, but it was physical. And at one point, this kid from Taylorville had hit a couple shots in the first half and hit a 3 to start the third quarter. And at some point, some fans from Effingham got on him kind of behind us because we're sitting on the floor. And he started chirping at them. And of course, they chirped back at him. Kid missed his next 8 shots. So the moral of the story is, and he was making hand gestures. No, buddy.
Yeah.
If you've got that much rabbit ears that someone's dad or mom got in your head by making some remark about you kind of what looked like a cheap shot or something, and it was just, and he struggled the rest of the way. And that game was physical at times, and I told Greg, it was like watching a blender play a mixer. Both teams were trying and just trying to get a win because the Hearts had won and Taylorville hadn't won. It was 1-4 against 0-5 at the time, or 1-3 against 0-4. And both teams kind of desperate. And the Hearts held on. Logan Heil, monster third quarter, about 7 rebounds, I think, in the third quarter, and a bunch of points, and played well in the third quarter. Just dominant third quarter by him.
Well, we've talked about in Effingham, then they went to the Marion shootout Saturday, got beat by Muscuda 45-41 in overtime.
Yeah.
So this
is a Muscuda team that beat Highland.
Yeah, I mean I think that's what I'm seeing from Effingham again is just that it was never going to happen overnight for them, and I don't know how many games they're going to win this year, but they were so many pieces being replaced that they were never going to just come out from day one and be world beaters. That wasn't going to happen. But I think people are really starting to feel their roles a little bit. Garrett Wolf is going to he's going to do most of the scoring a lot of times, and that's fine. But a kid like Logan Heil has really got to get comfortable with where he fits into the team and what he needs to do. A kid like Andrew Splector, who seems
Andrew had a tough game. He got foul trouble early. He had to set. He and Fox both got foul trouble and sat a lot of the first half. And the Hearts had to go deep into their bench and play some kids who just, they kept their finger in the dike and stopped the flood and kept Effingham. I don't think Effingham had the biggest lead of the game at 6. Taylorville's biggest lead was maybe 1 or 2, but it was one of those games all night. There were no big spurty runs, and so big win for the Hearts and a competitive game against Muscuda. Who you want to go to next?
Well, just a quick overview of what else happened in the Apollo for the boys since we're on that. Charleston finally played some games. Charleston was supposed to be in a tournament over in Paris Thanksgiving week, and that I don't know why, but it didn't happen. So Charleston had to open its season, play its first game Thursday night against Mount Zion, and Mount Zion is probably the class of the Apollo this year.
They got a good group of sophomores. Mount Zion's already beat Lincoln and Charleston.
So that was a tough one. Charleston turned around and got Taylorville on Saturday. But Taylorville's winless. Mattoon still hadn't won a game yet. So Mattoon lost to Muhammad by 2, and then Lincoln held them to 24 points. Lincoln didn't score a lot, but that's kind of what Lincoln does sometimes.
Lincoln's not your dad's Lincoln this year either.
No. So, I'm looking at what other teams have done, and Mount Zion's really good, but as far as the rest of the league, I think that if Effingham plays well, there's a lot of games in there that they can win. So
and that Muhammad win was at Mattoon, I think, which it's always tough to play at Mattoon, but Mattoon really struggled at Thanksgiving for the most part, and Muhammad getting a 2-point win there. So.
And Muhammad got beat by Mount Zion by 25 on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the Apollo may be, and I don't want this to be taken wrong, more wide open than we thought. I think Mount Zion, you're right. I think they're the clear-cut favorite, but I think the rest of it, there's going to be some interesting scores you're going to see.
Yeah, Mount Zion's only loss so far this year was in the championship of the Lincoln Thanksgiving tournament. They got beat by Belleville West by 1 point. So they're very good, but stay tuned. Okay, what do we want to shift to now?
Let's just go to St. Anthony or T-Town next.
Okay, St. Anthony. We'll go St. Anthony boys, I guess, and really as much. To talk about St. Anthony is to talk about North Clay, which is fine because Josh Zink was our guest last week, the coach of the North Clay boys team. And we talked about really being excited to see that North Clay St. Anthony game down in Louisville on Tuesday. And it was a good one. I got a chance to be there for that broadcast, and North Clay
I listened to you.
North Clay got the 53-49 win. It was another one that was tight throughout. I don't think anybody I think 5 points was the biggest margin either way. North Clay came out playing a 1-3-1 zone. They did it the entire game and really disrupted St. Anthony's offense. St. Anthony wasn't getting a lot of looks out of their offense. They were taking a lot of 3-pointers. They weren't making any.
And that's the thing a 1-3-1 is going to do. You want to create teams that, hey, I'm getting an open look from 3. I'm going to take it. And sometimes it's not the kid that the coach is really wanting to see take the shot. But other times, if a team doesn't hit, I mean, good shooting's contagious, and so's bad shooting.
Yeah,
And ball's not going in, everyone starts thinking it's a thimble up there.
yeah, and St. Anthony just could never get the lid off on their 3-pointers. And Brock Fearday scored, I don't know, 22, 24 points in the game, had 10 offensive rebounds. And that's where
that's the thing that 1-3-1 does. You can get hurt with the offensive glass, and that's why St. Anthony stayed in the ballgame, to be honest.
Yeah, St. Anthony had over 20 offensive rebounds in the game. Yeah, that was what kept them afloat. Brock scored his points, but he didn't get them out of the offense. You know, it was a lot of him getting offensive rebounds, and trust me, that doesn't mean that. I mean, that's part of his game too, right? And sometimes that's how he's going to get you. He's a good player, but I don't think that game did anything to answer the question for St. Anthony of who else is going to fill in as a scorer around him. It's still a bit of a mystery. Now they beat Sullivan 52-37 on Friday night, got back up to 500. St. Anthony's 3-3 on the year. So, you know, I don't know much about Sullivan. They're
not a good barometer.
Yeah. So the jury's still out on them. And then North Clay, they got a rematch with KZ Westfield Thursday. That was the championship game of the Cumberland tournament. KZ got them by a point. KZ, that game was closer than 15 points for most of the way, but KZ didn't end up beating them 66.
Not like they pulled away late. And it was at KZ. I know there was a lot of people thinking it was at North Clay, and I saw some video of it, and I saw those famous colors everywhere. It was at KZ. It's not an easy place. That's not an easy place to play,
right? And Casey's, you know, I mean, I don't put much stock in high school polls, period, but especially early season high school polls. But for whatever it's worth, Casey's considered to be one of the top 1A teams in the state. So
yeah, they're getting ranked. And
then North Clay also took that trip down to Kentucky that Josh talked about, and this Graves County team they played beat them 97-78. So that's a Mike Wilson game right there.
That is a Mike Wilson game. That is, you know, let's get up 80 shots. I mean, I like that tempo. Everybody, oh no, trust me, you don't go get a bottle of water and take 20 minutes to get back. You're glued to your seat because you might miss something.
But the thing, you know, that getting back to that North Clay St. Anthony game for a minute, we had given Logan Fleener our Attaboy of the week last week, and he had a little trouble getting anything to go early on in that game too. I think St. Anthony did a pretty good job of hassling him and not making it easy. He still got some points by the time it was all said and done. Not like he had been, but he did have the signature moment of the game, which was I wouldn't call it a breakaway dunk necessarily. He got out in the open floor a little bit, but he only had about half court or a little less than half court to accelerate. And boy, did he still get up and throw it down. He's got
right in your grill too. I know where you're sitting.
Yeah, the boys got hops. Right before the game started, you know how kids they'll just leap in the air once just to get their legs loose. And I just happened to look up as he was doing it, and I thought he was flying for a second. I thought somebody had swooped in from the rafters because he gets so high off the ground for no taller than he is. He's just got tremendous leaping ability, and he's not the only one on that team.
Right. So it's kind of Wilson-esque.
Well, I don't know what Wilson we're talking again.
Hey, also remember, Logan's mom was a very good athlete. I'm not saying anymore. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, listen, and this may have even found its way on the air. Justin Fleener keeps the book for that North Clay basketball team, and he came over to wave and say hello to us, I think, before we got off the air. And we asked him, we're like, he's not getting those hops from you, right? You know, that's all mom. And I don't think he'll argue with you on that one.
Now, when Justin does the book, did he get a new pair of glasses, or he still have the ones with only one earpiece? He's got to wear them like funky on his head because it's almost like a monocle.
I'm not certain on that one. I don't.
Check him out next time you see him on the bench.
As far as the rest of the NTC goes, there haven't been a lot of conference games yet. Neoga's played a couple. They beat CHBC. They beat Cowden Herrick on Tuesday night. Then they beat They beat St. Elmo Brownstown by 2 points on their homecoming game Friday night. So Neoga's
That's
the
a
only
big win. St. Elmo Brownstown's off to a pretty good start.
they had not lost yet. They went undefeated down at that Mulberry Grove tournament, and it sounded like they gave Neoga everything they wanted. And then they turn around. St. Elmo Brownstown turned around, beat Tri-County 70-36 yesterday.
Yeah,
So I don't know anything about Tri-County, but you double a team up, and that's the thing. St. Elmo's putting points on the board, so they've obviously got a lot of kids who can score. Altamont got a couple wins. Altamont's had, they only played once during Thanksgiving week, and they had to go up to Morton. Took a tough loss there, but that's a big school. They come back and beat Cumberland Tuesday night. Then they beat Vandalia Friday night. Both of those are, they beat Cumberland by 9, Vandalia by 13. So Altamont's got a couple of wins under its belt. They're finally going to play a conference game Friday night this week. They'll go to South Central. They've got Newton Tuesday, but then they'll finally play a conference game Friday night.
Newton game will be a good game for them.
Yeah, I think so. Newton's off to a good start. I don't have their record handy, but they have been
4-1, I believe.
Yeah, they've done some good work in the early going. Dieterich,
big conference game though. When did you do it?
Yeah, are you talking Windsor Stew and Dieterich?
Yeah, Windsor Dieterich.
Yeah, well, so Dieterich on Tuesday night, Dieterich got a win over Sisney, which is a good win Sisney's pretty solid, I think, and Dieterich beat him by 12. Then Windsor Stew, they beat Sullivan Tuesday night by 10. So that sets up Friday night at Dieterich. Windsor Stew comes in, and of course, Windsor Stew Straws, we've talked about their coaching situation a little bit. Bob Lockhart stepping away right before the season started, and Shane Smith, who had coached at Stew Straws once upon a time, and he stepped in, but then he wasn't available Friday night. They had, a medical emergency in the family. I'm still only going to say that because I still don't know exactly what's out there, but he wasn't able to be there. So Mitch Martin, who, if you pay attention, Mitchell's been on the bench for just about every team in the area at some point or another. He's on
the Terry Primer Rick Cook program.
Yeah, he's the journeyman coach of local basketball. So he goes from being the fresh soft coach there at Windsor Stewardson-Strasburg at the beginning,
the interim JV coach,
to the JV coach, to all of a sudden coaching the varsity game at Dieterich. It's Dieterich's homecoming, and this game goes double overtime, and Windsor Stewardson-Strasburg picks up a 60-52 win.
Big win.
And Dieterich. So here's the thing: Dieterich had control of this game in the first quarter, and I was kind of worried for Mitch that it was going to spiral out of control. Not that I wanted one team or the other to win, of course, but just because that's a tough situation to step into. I've been on Park League teams where the person who's the head coach steps away, and I've had to do it, and I didn't even want to do that. So I cannot imagine coaching a varsity basketball game, on short notice.
Whitey, it's easy.
Oh, well, okay. I'll take your word.
Most nervous I ever was the first time I had to do that, by the way. But
Windsor Stew, after the first quarter, really picked it up defensively, I think. Caused a lot of turnovers. Dieterich turned it over just way too much in that game. Dieterich's got, they turn it over on the perimeter a lot. And the Hatchets were able to exploit that, get themselves back in the game. And then it was just sort of anybody's ball game. And it went right down to the wire. And I gotta look it up here. Let me look it up because I want to make sure that I get it right. But Caleb Gephardt for Dieterich hit a huge 3-pointer at the end of the first overtime to send it to double, because it looked like Windsor was going to be able to hang on and win it. But Gephardt just steps back and drills one from the top of the key and sends you to a second overtime. But from there, Dieterich didn't score in the second overtime, and Austin Wittenberg, who scored 22 points in that game, he had 14 in regulation, and really he had 8 after 3 quarters. So he really picked it up in the late going. He went 6 for 6 on his free throws in the second overtime, hit 2 out of 3 in the first overtime, 8 straight all told, and was a big reason why the Hatchets were able to get that win. And I just think that, every game in the NTC is going to be a battle. I think
I agree with you.
And so every win is huge. And especially, I just think that's an emotional win for Windsor, Stewardson-Strasburg. Those kids have been, they've had to deal with a lot just in terms of not knowing what to expect out of a situation. There's just not been a lot of continuity for reasons that are outside their control. And so for them to step up and win a big game like that, and that's the second time they've gone double overtime, because they beat Cerro Gordo in double overtime over in Cerro Gordo's Thanksgiving tournament the week prior. So they've been tested in some emotional situations a couple of times already and have come through. So big win for the Hatchets. And again, every win in the conference is going to be a big one. So they're 5-1.
And I give Mitch a shout out on that. That's it's a tough situation to be in. I don't know if it's easier when you have notice or don't have notice, because sometimes when you have notice that you're going to have to coach a game, you get yourself worked up into something. So kudos there, and NTC is going to be a load.
I look at it and look, just to be frank, it seems like that CHBC is going to struggle a little bit this year, but other than that, I don't look at any game as a foregone conclusion. I really don't. I mean, the talk is, of course, that Altamont is the class of the conference, and that may very well be true, but I just think that there are a lot of teams that if you're not ready to play them, they're going to jump up and bite you. They're going to be ready to get a win. And I fall into this trap with the NTC a lot. Maybe I'm a little bit of a homer, I'll admit that. Where I say at the beginning of the year, well, this league's going to be wide open. You never know what to expect. And then you get to the tournament and it's chalk and it's not as dramatic as you think. But I really think this is the year where that's not going to be the case, where the seedings in that tournament are not going to mean a whole heck of a lot. So we'll see. Could be wrong.
It'll be interesting. Always is.
But as far as this week goes, I think that Altamont South Central.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, just real quick. Altamont plays South Central this week on Friday. St. Elmo Brownstown at St. Anthony on Friday. You got Diederich at Neoga on Tuesday. I think those are games you look at and say those are big NTC games that keep an eye on. North Clay also goes to SEB, so keep a look at that. St. Anthony we mentioned them playing St. Elmo on Friday. They'll have CHBC on the road Tuesday, so we'll see what St. Anthony can do with all that. So yeah, now T-Town.
And then boys, I think their first game was at Tolono yesterday since Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they hadn't played. They hadn't played in a solid week.
Went up to Tolono, and I think we're trailing at the half, and ended up making a nice victory out of it. Won by 16.
Yeah, 56-40. So
yeah, and they were down at half. I didn't see a score, so big win for them. They've got homecoming Tuesday night with Paris, and then nothing Friday night.
No,
they go to Bloomington Central Catholic Friday night. That's going to be a test. They're a good ball club. They're ranked.
Good team, and then that's just a haul, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if players care about this stuff as much as we like to say sometimes, but I just feel like sitting on a bus for that long can make things a little unpredictable sometimes.
75% of them sleep the whole way there. So
yeah, okay. Well, why don't we just hit T-Town girls real quick while we're at it? They played Benton. That was their only game this week. They also took a pretty long break. Is that right? Had they really not played? They took an even longer break than the boys then.
May have.
Yeah, they didn't even play it all the week before. And they played Benton Thursday night and got a 60-57 win. So they're 4-1 now. That's I'm looking at Kaylee Nieberge scored 29 points in that game. and she's been there. She's averaging 18 a game now. So, she scored 29 in their first game against Mount Vernon. She scored 29 against Benton. She's been in double figures 4 out of 5 games. Lori talked about needing somebody to step up and be the guy, so to speak. And it seems like the early returns are that Kaylee is doing that, with Emily Conkle also, for the most part, providing you a pretty good secondary option. Courtney Gibson, Chloe Prupst also doing a good job. So, there's they're back in playing games and getting a win there. They got Pana coming to town tomorrow night.
Good ball game.
St. Joe Ogden Thursday night. So T-Town's got
back good ball games.
Yeah, a couple of fun home games. Pana, I feel like Pana played somebody fairly local. Yeah, they played Cotton Herrick on the 29th of November and beat CHBC by 12. So, Cowden's a good team. I think that that would tell you Pana ought to be a pretty entertaining ball game for the Lady Shoes.
Yeah, well, and those are the kind of games Lori wants. She wants to be tested, and then it gets tougher on the Lady Shoes after Christmas. So that's when they kind of are building.
Going to the Apollo girls, I think we'll wrap up with NTC girls. Apollo girls, Effingham got 3 wins this week. Jeff Schaefer's team, they beat Taylorville Tuesday. Apollo's doing their scheduling again, where sometimes the boys play on Thursdays and the girls will play.
Yeah, I will tell you about this a little bit. I do have a theory. I mean, Apollo's trying to get ahead with Title IX and before the state. No, it's a heck of a lot easier to find a boys officiating crew on a Thursday night than it is a Friday night.
Yeah, and
that actually is a factor.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I know that I have, without naming coaches, just because I don't want to air anybody's even mildly soiled laundry in a public setting. But the one thing that coaches have said to me about that is that, is it nice? Do the girls like to get to play on a Friday night sometimes in front of a Friday night crowd, which is different than a Thursday night crowd? Yeah, that's, that can be a good atmosphere, but also like sometimes you just like, you like the rhythm of knowing we play on Mondays and Thursdays. We know when we're going to play. We know when we're going to practice. So that's something I hadn't even really thought of. But from a coach's perspective, you like knowing from week to week what you're going to look like. But the officials are a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a pretty solid.
The problem is going from bad to worse in a hurry. I do know that there was some proposed legislation to the IHSA that did not make the upcoming ballot for principals and ADs to shorten some seasons. Maybe take baseball from, I don't know, let's say you can play 35 contests down to 30 or 31. Same with basketball. A big cause of it is officials. It really is.
Yeah.
It's getting the officials. They are not. I've already seen games postponed and the schools come out and said, we could not get officials. And the other thing I think you're starting to see some momentum for again is moving the start of basketball season back because, for example, Sacred Heart Griffin, I know had kids playing for a football championship on a Friday night and played basketball the next day.
Yeah, that's tough. And
that's not in the best. It's not a good, healthy thing for those kids to be doing.
No, that's
Sacred Heart Griffin's ranked #1 in the state in 3A, and they're a powerful team, and I understand all that. But I'm just saying, you can't go from that one sport to the other that quick of a turnaround. It's just not good. And
and that's a bit of an outlier. Of course, that's not a common problem, but it happens.
Exactly. So,
and we don't need to get into a long discussion about this right now, but another thing that I fear is they might try to go back to 2 officials on a varsity crew to try and stretch it out a little bit more.
Don't be surprised you won't see that.
But
the thing is, you will see that was not going to make the ballot. So it makes a lot of sense, but it did not make the cut to get to the final ballot. But Illinois plays more high school basketball season is more games, I think, than 49 other states. There may be one other state like Kansas that plays the same amount or more, but no one else does.
But I like it, Mike. I like it. Nobody asked me for my personal opinion. That doesn't take any other factors into consideration. But
there's talk about not starting basketball till after Thanksgiving because it's how it used to be.
Well, that's something we can dive into a little bit more at some point.
That's fine. Just food for thought.
But again, Effingham, they got 3 wins. They beat Taylorville in a conference game Tuesday night. They beat Mount Vernon Thursday night. Taylorville by 9, Mount Vernon by 6. Then they played North Clay yesterday. North Clay came in and they beat North Clay by 13. So the Effingham girls are 6-1, won their first conference game. The surprising thing to me for the Apollo Conference is actually got nothing to do with Effingham. It's more that Muhammad got beat by Mount Zion Friday night, 44-39. We kind of figured Muhammad to be a team that may or may not, they were pretty powerful in the Apollo last year, and Mount Zion was so. Well, Mount Zion got that win. And Mount Zion beat Pana Saturday. Okay. So Mount Zion seems to be on the up and up a little bit.
Got one pretty good player, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. The name escapes me, but I talked to
Clayton, but that was her mom's maiden name.
I talked to the Cumberland girls coach a lot, and she's going to run into Mount Zion over at the Arthur Lovington Holiday Tournament here in a couple of weeks, and she was talking about how she's got to play Mount Zion again, and that girl was a load last year, and I'm sure is even better. But yeah, Effingham's 6-1. It's a good place to be. They
lost one of their players to injury too this past week.
Yeah, you hadn't seen Sydney Donaldson's name in the box scores lately. She's been out of commission, it would appear. Bria Beals has really stepped up, and Madison Mapes scored 24 points against Mount Vernon. So you've got those two, and then Ellen Eberge, all of them averaging right around a dozen points a game. That's good. That's difficult to deal with. It's one thing. It's one thing that if your scoring leaders are all, if you've got like 3 or 4 scoring leaders and they're all averaging like 6 or 7 points a game. It's another thing if you've got 3 scoring leaders and they're all averaging around a dozen. That becomes a little more difficult to deal with. So
yep, sure does.
Okay, we're getting long on this. We still got an attaboy to give out. NTC girls, listen, St. Anthony and Yoga and Altamont are all still undefeated. St. Anthony and Altamont are going to play this week. I'm looking at the games. I'm looking at the games this week as far as the NTC goes. Nothing really particularly interesting happened. All the teams that you would think should have won their games. Nothing particularly close or noteworthy. I mentioned that CHBC played Pana in a non-conference game. That was a tight one. So Cowden Herrick's lost a couple of games, but one of those to what figures to be a good Pana team. The other one to Diederich in the championship game of that CHBC tournament. So that just shows you that even though Diederich's 0-2 in the conference, they could still play well enough to beat a top tier team. But yeah, St. Anthony and Altamont play at Altamont tomorrow night. We're going to have that on the radio. Matt and I are going to do that one.
There you go.
So somebody's going to get their first loss of the year. And I don't know who it's going to be. Honestly, I don't have a very strong opinion about it.
Big good ball game.
So I'm really interested to get a look at the both of them. And then CHBC comes to St. Anthony Thursday. So it's a big week for the lady.
Big week for St. Anthony.
Yeah, big week for them. They could really put themselves in a really good early position with a couple of wins, or they could just as easily lose a couple, and not because they played badly or anything like that, but just because two very tough opponents. But
right.
Other than that, Neoga, I'm looking at their schedule. They go to Tri-County Tuesday. That could be a bit of a test, but there's a pretty good chance that by the end of this week, Neoga is going to be 11-0. They've got South Central on Monday. They've got they go to Oblong Thursday. They go to Cumberland Saturday. They could in Altamont. Aside from that St. Anthony game, you know they've got Central A&M this week. Game it'd probably be a tough battle for them, but you know. Some really good teams in the NTC. We've been saying it all along. Brownstown St. Elmo 7-1, by the way. Worth mentioning just because they are off to a great start. And plus, I think their 8th grade girls just won a regional too. So even more help coming. A pretty good girls conference. Pretty good, even better boys conference. I think the NTC is just fun. And I'm not going to beat that drum anymore because I do it every week. So let's get the boy and get the hell out of here.
And let me guess, you got the soundbite working because it's your Attaboy. Just going out on a limb.
I do have it queued up. I apologize for not having it ready for you last week, but we mentioned the double overtime game at Diedrich Friday night. And by the way, what a week for Premier Broadcasting. We had the St. Anthony North Clay game that ended up being decided by 4. Then you and Greg go to Taylorville Thursday, and it's a 2-point game.
We almost had a wreck on the way home. Same.
A deer or somebody? Oh, okay.
Another driver, not Mr. Sapp's fault.
Nope.
But this car was coming out of Pana as we're coming into Pana. While you're still in town, you got that curve, and we weren't sure they were going to stay in their lane. And Greg actually came to a complete stop.
Well.
And they were either going to go in front of us, we thought, veering off down the side road, or hit the headlight or hit Greg's door, and they missed everything, and we're not sure how. And Greg almost spilled his French fries. Let's just say it was that close.
Oh man, from McDonald's, no doubt.
Oh yeah.
And then Thursday or Friday night, of course, we had that double overtime game at Diedrich, and I mentioned this already, but Austin Wittenberg, you know, a senior on this team, went over the 1,000-point mark this season as well for his career. But in that game, he scored 22 points, and again, only had 8 after 3 quarters, but hit 8 free throws in a row down the stretch. And listen, you know, it's a nerve-wracking thing to step up to that free throw line when the game's on the line, and you know, and to more to the point, Windsor Stew Straws missed some front ends of 1-and-1s in the 4th quarter and the first overtime where the game could have been over already. So it'd be easy to kind of get snake bit, you know, to feel like, well, we're doing this again, huh? But no, he hit all 6 that he took in the second overtime, 8 in a row across those 2 overtimes, and helped the Hatchets seal off the victory. And so I think that between that performance and the fact that he is the area's newest 1,000-point scorer, Austin Wittenberg, this one goes out to you. There you go.
Didn't hear it.
You didn't hear it?
Nope. Pretty garbly, Whitey. I didn't hear it.
Man, I don't know what to tell you.
You'll have to do it without the audio.
Gosh dang it. Well, it was a guy going, "Attaboy, Luther!"
Attaboy. You got it in you.
Man, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that to see if it sounded as bad for you as it did for me. I mean, I'm hearing it, you know. Sounds pretty good.
I can honestly say I didn't do that to make you do it verbally. I actually did not hear it, so I wasn't that quick-witted.
I don't know. This is a very slickly produced show, but for some reason, we're not figuring this one out.
Something.
But Austin Wittenberg will get a $10 gift certificate from either Pizza Man or Joe's Pizza. Thanks to them for sponsoring this. And, you know, we are glad to be doing this again and recognizing kids like that. He's had a great basketball career there, great effort there. But I'll tell you what, speaking of kids, I can hear mine screaming outside at each other. And that
Maybe
probably,
that's why we didn't hear the Attaboy Luther. Your kids were being too noisy.
I don't know. Hopefully none of that is permeating into this because
I don't hear them. Those are angels.
Yeah, sure. They're getting on each other's last nerves, I can tell. But
That's good.
thanks to Leon Gobczynski for taking the time. We'll have to get him back on. You could tell like it's all pretty. He's got plenty more to tell. I think if
Got a
we
lot
get
of stories.
pushed in the right direction, so that would be good. So thanks to Leon, Mike. We'll reconvene next week. More ball to talk about, including a couple
Next week and probably the week after. I may have after we do the next week. We may be able to release the seedings for the Christmas tournament.
Nice.
And the following week we'll have breaking news that night, and then following week we may have a few coaches from the Christmas tournament join us.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We did that last year and it was pretty solid. So why not give it a shot again?
Yep.
All right, Mike. Till next week. Later.